You're tuned in to News Now on KFUG Community Radio 101.1 FM and streaming online at kfugradio.org. This co-production between KFUG, the Rivers Outpost, and Redwood Voice is bringing you the latest happenings right here in Del Norte County. On tonight's stories, the COVID-19 update you've come to expect, how we're faring, what we're doing about it, the current numbers, and this time, discussing the surge of cases that originated from Pelican Bay State Prison. In other news, Avi Critz talks to Sheriff Apperson in a continuation of his previous story regarding defunding the police and how our local law enforcement interacts with our community. And in a continuation of a story that started from one hateful Facebook post from a public official, a Redwood Voice segment from your very own Persephone Rose, that's me, explaining the situation, talking to someone who was personally entangled with the situation after speaking up, and the rally in front of the Flynn Center to demand that Gitlin's actions receive consequences. All that and more on tonight's News Now. For KFUG Community Radio, I'm Persephone Rose, and I'm joined by Avi Critz. First things first, the COVID-19 update. News on the COVID situation as it stands right now, like you've come to expect. This information was written and valid as of July 28th, so be aware of any changes that may have come since then. Upon writing this, there have been a total of 88 confirmed cases in Del Norte County. That is up 27 since our last report on News Now, when it was at 61. There is currently one active case, and back on July 22nd, there were a notable 17 active cases at once. 3,991 tests have been administered. Though there have been 2 hospitalizations from COVID-19 in Del Norte County overall, there are currently no active hospitalizations as they have made recoveries. All of this is according to the Information Hub on the Del Norte County Public Health's website, and if you would like to further track this information, you can find it at covid19.dnco.org. Of that previous surge, in which we had 17 simultaneously active cases in Del Norte County, 11 were connected with Pelican Bay State Prison staff, the Public Health Branch reported last Wednesday. 15 positive cases were identified at the prison following the staff testing last week. Most were asymptomatic, and no one has been hospitalized, according to the Public Health Branch. Due to the rising numbers in California, 29 other counties are being closely monitored for COVID-19 activity, as we reported last News Now. If 10 more COVID-19 cases are identified in Del Norte County in the next 2 weeks, we may very well find ourselves on that list. The community could find itself having to shutter more than indoor dining rooms at restaurants. It would take 27 cases within a 14-day period to land the community on the state's monitoring list, Emergency Services Manager Kimmy Scott told the Rivers Outpost on Thursday. The California Department of Public Health flags a country if it has 100 cases per 100,000 people, if its test positivity rate is more than 8%, or if there is more than 10% increase in hospitalizations. The state also flags a county if it has less than 20% of its hospitals' intensive care unit beds available or less than 25% of its ventilators available, according to Scott. In California, counties that are on the monitoring list for the 3 consecutive days must shutter gyms and fitness centers, places of worship, and cultural ceremonies such as weddings and funerals, offices for non-critical sectors, personal care services such as nail salons and body wax, hair salons and barbershops, and shopping malls, according to CDPH. An order by California Governor Gavin Newsom on July 13th closed the following activities statewide: dine-in restaurants, wineries and tasting rooms, movie theaters, family entertainment centers like bowling alleys, zoos and museums, and card rooms. Public health staff are still conducting case investigations connected with the cluster at Pelican Bay, Scott said. One of the things they're hoping to identify is how staff were infected with COVID-19, she said. Pelican Bay State Prison will test all its inmates for COVID-19, according to the Public Health Branch. All prison staff will be tested again early next week.
A wildfire near milepost marker 21 on Highway 96 is 90% contained, Hoopa Valley Tribal officials reported on Sunday. 150 personnel are continuing to suppress the blaze, which started July 20th and is human-caused, according to the tribe's news release. Firefighters will continue to monitor the fire in the steepest areas where hazards remain. According to the news release, quote, "The milepost 21 fire is 90% contained today. there is a little more suppression repair to do, and isolated stump holes are still burning in the interior of the fire perimeter. Some parts of the fire will be monitored and patrolled in the steepest areas where hazards remain. Beginning today, a smaller Type 3 firefighting organization will be in place to complete containment of the fire. The remaining work is focused on suppression repair. Portions of the dozer lines remain. They must be treated with water bars and covered with brush, and then inspected before considered complete. A wood chipper will be brought in to chip up cut brush. Wood chips are spread over areas disturbed by fire line construction to prevent later soil erosion. An excavator will be used to water bar and place slash and cut brush over the dozer lines. The firefighters will also assist the Hoopa Fire Department as needed with any new starts. Weather for the area. Hot and dry weather conditions are expected to continue through the week. Good relative humidity recovery of 50% or higher will occur overnight. Thunderstorms are expected to the north and east of the fire area today. There is a slight chance for storms in the fire area. Winds of 6 to 12 miles per hour with gusts of 25 miles per hour during the warmest parts of the afternoon are expected. Unless conditions change, this is the final update for the Milepost 21 fire. California Interagency Incident Management Team 11 appreciates the support of Hoopa Valley Tribal members and the Hoopa Fire Department. We hope everyone remains healthy during these challenging pandemic times. End quote.
And now, a story that was already written in a promo created for KFUG Community Radio to spread awareness of the services of RX Safe Del Norte. That means that what you're about to hear is just like regular news that you would hear on our newscast, but you also get some music underneath it as a little treat. Enjoy. Do you know someone whose life has been affected by opioid use disorder? Have you ever wondered how you could help those caught up in the opioid epidemic? Did you know there is a local community group sharing this information just a click away? The Wellness and Recovery series, presented by RX Safe Del Norte, is a virtual series of workshops, presenters, and activities working to engage our community to reduce stigma and promote education and prevention around opioid use disorder. From hearing testimony from our very own community members, trainings on how to deliver life-saving treatment, and workshops led by health experts from Del Norte and beyond, the Wellness and Recovery series is a game-changer in the fight to move towards healing and recovery. RX Safe Del Norte invites everyone in the community to attend the series featuring presentations for youth, public, and professionals. Live presentations on Facebook and Zoom will be happening on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday from June 30th to July 30th, including speaker and panel series, videos, and activities, along with social media campaigns throughout the month. Tune in and comment on these and all the past videos on the Wellness and Recovery Facebook and YouTube pages. Register today and get all the info on the Eventbrite page, wellnessandrecoveryseries.eventbrite.com, and follow them on Facebook at facebook.com/wellness and recovery. For this link, please keep in mind that wellness is spelled with 3 L's. This Wellness and Recovery series is presented by RX Safe Del Norte, Open Door Community Health Centers, United Indian Health Services, Yurok Tribe Health and Human Services, Yurok Tribe Wellness Coalition, and California Rural Indian Health Board. For more information, contact Malia Florindo at trainerrxsafedn@gmail.com or 707-278-9656.
The Yurok tribe announced on Friday the candidates who will run in tribal council elections in October. Incumbent Edward Horse Aubrey will run against Jack Matz and Philip L. Williams for the North District seat, according to a tribal news release. David L. Gensaw Sr. will challenge Ryan Ray to represent the Requa District, according to the news release. For the Waitchpeck District, Jewel Frank, Lucinda Inde Myers, and Eugene Gino O'Rourke are challenging incumbent Toby Van Landingham, according to the tribe's release. Primary elections for tribal council will be held October 14th. Tribal members who will be 18 years old by the election day must register to vote by August 31st to participate in this election. For more information, call the Election Department at 707-482-1350 or visit the Yurok Tribe's website.
And now, a segment from Redwood Voice. Last week on News Now, I teased a story for a segment we hope to establish soon over on the Redwood Voice side of things, something that has become a bit more clear since it was last discussed. The Accountability Corner, a moment to talk about people in power who do, say, promote, or otherwise engage in something harmful, bringing those actions up explaining why they are harmful, and overall keeping accountability on those who influence our lives and our community. Whether they decide to engage in positive change and learn from those actions and assist in helping those they have promoted harm against, or ultimately shrug it off, ignore it, or even refute it, is a choice ultimately left up to them. But at the bare minimum, the Accountability Corner ensures that their actions are known, noticed, and spread, and that the consequences of such may follow. Roger Gitlin, 1st District Supervisor, has fallen into the spotlight of this project. This was sparked by an inflammatory post on his Facebook page that incited hate speech that he attributed to evangelist Franklin Graham, though we should clarify this is a misattribution based off a fairly common misconception and that the original author is unknown according to Snopes, declaring that the way of life for straight white Christian men is endangered. You can find this on our last airing of News Now. There have since been even more kinds of posts. One that especially caught my eye regarded what has become apparently a controversial matter, somehow. Here's the post in his own words. Quote, "Shame on the California endowment. I am aware this billboard has brought lots of unhelpful talk among social media. Inserting the very serious COVID-19 pandemic dilemma into politics, the California endowment has mixed partisan, divisive opinion, with public health in erecting this billboard entering Crescent City. Those who thought long and hard on who and what should appear on this public display failed abysmally in bringing our community together. All lives matter should have been the message, a message of bringing our diverse groups together. Noticeably missing is any reference to European American inclusion. The face declaring the ending of racism only underscores the racist mindset of the California endowment. The inclusion of the clenched fist sends a terrible message to our community. Tragic. The billboard is exclusionary and insulting to Del Norte County and changes no minds, further polarizes us, and widens the Grand Canyon-esque gap between our diverse cultures. This shameful display should be taken down immediately, and continued funding for the California endowment should be reconsidered." End quote. As I said, capping his previous post in the previous newscast. Woo, a lot to unpack. For context, in case you have not seen this billboard, it depicts a group of people, headshots you can say that are closely cropped in on their shoulders and up. The sign reads, "I wear my mask to protect my family, to support frontline workers, to build a new future." The group of people, 7 in total, are each wearing masks that say something on the front. They are as follows: protect our elders, universal health care, Black Lives Matter, dreamers, paid leave, vote, and end racism. These very basic, very regular things to say that any basic, moral, normal person would engage and agree with have seemingly caused an outrage, as we perhaps should have come to expect. Bridging the gaps of where we are now with previous information, I spoke personally to Julia Dorman. I informed her of my longer form project and asked for her own testimony regarding her thoughts on the original post, her experience speaking against it, and the very unexpected retaliation that came from it, including the act of her email being leaked in order to sic supporters of Gitlin onto her. Here are excerpts from that interview.
My name is Julia Dorman, and I am from Del Norte County, born and raised, and I currently live in Seattle. Like I had mentioned in my letter, I had been following Roger Gitlin's posts for a while. I think kind of really ever since the rallies to open the county back up started, because it was a little concerning to me as somebody who has a lot of loved ones still living there. You know, I saw this post and it was so blatantly racist and with so many gross stereotypes and containing a message that I thought was so harmful that I felt like I needed to comment. And as an aside, I had only really commented on one of his other posts, and it was very calm. It was very, saying, "Oh, this article isn't very accurate and it's not really applicable to the community that you're serving." So this was kind of the first time that I had really, shared a comment like this on his page. And I think I was hoping and naively thinking that maybe a strong condemnation of this post might result in him removing it. And of course, that did not happen. And instead, to my surprise, he ended up blocking me from Facebook. You know, and I found out he also blocked my brother from Facebook. I found out he blocked 2 of my friends who liked our comments. And, you know, it started to get me thinking, you know, how many other people has he blocked? And how many other people don't get to contribute to this narrative? And how many other people maybe just don't even know that he's posting things like this that are so harmful? And so that kind of led me to write to the board of supervisors, because I wanted to make sure they knew that these are the kinds of things he's posting, and that they very well may be informing the things that he proposes and the things that he votes on. So yeah, so I wrote to them. So after sending the email, I found out there was going to be a board meeting the following week. And so I thought I would share my public comment because I wanted to make sure that people heard that this is going on, that he's posting things like this that I think are very harmful. When I had sent the email, worst case scenario, I just figured that nobody would respond to it and I wouldn't hear anything back from any of the board of supervisors, or that maybe Roger would respond to it, which I was fine with as well. I made sure to CC him on that email. But instead, I woke up the next morning and I have a flood of emails from people that I do not know. And they were defending Roger, and, you know, saying things like that I'm an outsider and that I have no right to comment on what he posts on his Facebook page. And if I don't like what I see, just don't look at it. One of the more surprising emails that I got was from somebody who shared that they were a former city council member, and this former city council member took the initiative to CC even more people on her email to me. You know, this included, you know, people that she said were on the Taxpayers Association and the Del Norte Republicans, and you know, all the while Roger is CC'd. It was unbelievable to have, number one, a current elected official sharing my personal email, and then a former elected official sharing my email with even more people. And I guess one thing I would just like to add that I think is important is that I had responded to 2 of these emails, and then when I got a couple more, there was one that referenced a family member and that family member's business. And I kind of had to stop for a moment and realize that this retaliation was so much more than just retaliation against me for saying something. It was retaliation against innocent members of my family who have not said anything about this person. And it was a little scary in that way. Everyone has different ideas and different opinions, and my opinions are my own. I speak for myself. I do not speak for any of my family members or my friends that I know there. So I would just like to throw that out there, that I don't think it's very appropriate to attack other people who are related to me in that way. I'm an adult. I can hold my own. We don't need to bring other people into this. Another thing that I would like to say, you know, to address the people who said, if I don't like those posts, just don't look at them. You know, I very much believe that topics like racism and homophobia are not really debatable topics. You know, silence often equates to violence, and I am not one to let people promote violence. One thing I would like to say to, I think, any elected official in Crescent City or Del Norte County is to just keep in mind who is not in the room with you, and to consider maybe who does not have a seat at the table. I'm not saying that they're not doing this right now already, but I just, I think it's important for people who are in decision-making positions to really continue to reevaluate if their actions, their votes, their posts, and their focus as elected officials are representing everyone in their district and in their community to the best of their ability. One thing that I've been thinking about a lot recently, especially with some new posts that have been made, is I would encourage everyone to actually read the articles that people are posting and not just the sharer's summary of what they got out of the article. Roger Gitlin is someone who is notorious for doing this, where he will post an article like the one he posted just the other day of, it was an article talking about the public comment period, talking about how he was the only one to not vote for the proclamation in support of equity, equality, and accountability. But all he talked about was how the board changed a line of wording in his proclamation in support of law enforcement. And he twisted it to create this narrative that the board does not support law enforcement, when really, if you read the article, it says that it passed unanimously, and even he voted for it. But then you look at the comments, and it's clear that people are not reading that. They're only reading his summary and saying, oh, of course the board doesn't support law enforcement. And, there are numerous examples out there of Roger doing this with articles. And so I just really, really want to encourage people to read the article for themselves.
At this point in our newscast, the next bits of information I'll be talking about are, in a sense, a second, different news story, but is closely connected to the Roger Gitlin information as a whole. I just wanted to note this for the continuity of this video, as we discuss July 28th's rally in front of the Flynn Center to demand accountability and action against Roger Gitlin. This rally was organized by the hard-working Denise Doyle Schnacker, who opened the rally up with this.
Thank you guys for being here. Well, some folks have made written statements and turned them in so that they can be read into record. And then some of us are choosing to join the Zoom link and make our statements today during public comment. But for me, this is what started, this is what made me do this on top of 10,000 other things. So Roger Gitlin on his Facebook on July 10th wrote,
At this point, she reads Roger Gitlin's post to reiterate what he said. However, we've cut this to save on time, especially due to the sound of wind in vehicles. You can find this post read out loud, however, on our previous newscast.
so that is why I started this. And then 2 days ago, our fearless supervisor, a representative, he calls himself, of our county, decided that he was going to attack the billboards at the south end of town, and basically stating that inciting violence. So asking people to fight against the message that was on the billboard, which was one of diversity and inclusion and yeah, wear a mask. He politicized something that didn't need to be politicized, and in so doing, encouraged others to hate me. I take this personal.
Right.
And this is not okay.
Yep.
But most importantly to me, Roger's leaving. The planet, when it's his time, the county sooner, hopefully rather than later. But the other supervisors, the other leaders of our community, in my opinion, at the highest level of government in our county, have not said a flipping word, have not denounced it, and their silence is basically making it unsafe for me and my family to live here. And that's not okay.
That's right.
So, with that being said, at At 10 o'clock, they will open session.
While awaiting the public session of the Board of Supervisors Zoom call, many came up to speak in front of the rally regarding their thoughts on the matter. Some of that audio is unfortunately unavailable because, well, you heard the wind when it was manageable in the previous clip, and at some points it proceeded to get worse. One such statement that was unfortunately unusable because of wind spoke of the blatant disrespect Roger Gitlin had regarding tribal sovereignty of the Yurok tribe earlier this year when he encouraged people to visit the log cabin diner and violate their safety orders. Others had things like this to say.
So, you guys hear me? So in Roger Gitlin's post, he attacked quite a few people, pretty much everyone who's probably standing here right now. But think of the people that Roger Gitlin attacked and said did not belong to have a voice. School teachers are government employees. The people who work on the road are government employees. Roger Gitlin is in charge of helping to manage this county, and he is disrespecting every single person who actually works for the county to improve where we live. That's not even talking about the numerous other people that he disrespected, and the fact that the other supervisors have yet to call him out says that they are either complicit in his support and supporting his message, or are afraid of him. Silence has always been known as consent. Yep. Always. Yep. Throughout history, any time that someone has been silenced, it has been understood that they have accepted what has occurred. Understand this to be that the supervisors agree with Gitlin, or they should make a public stance condemning the things that he has said. There is no other option.
So when Denise read that post, that was the first time I had read it or heard of it. And I want to point out something that I'm sure a lot of other people noticed too, is that a lot of the Republicans, hardcore Republicans especially, like to claim that the liberal politics tend to erase history. Yet in that post, he claimed that he gave credit to white Christian men for founding this country, completely erasing any type of contribution that a person of color or woman has made to the foundation of this country, completely ignoring the sacrifice that Black people and Native American people had to endure through genocide and slavery in order to give us the privileges that we have today. And that is something that people don't want to talk about. They want to claim that because we do not support Confederate names being celebrated, or Confederacy being celebrated, or racism, that we are trying to erase history. When in reality, all we're trying to do is give credit and give respect to the people who deserve it, who sacrificed so much during the foundation of this country.
I am powerful. We are powerful. I'm tired of this white fear dominating this county. It's white fear, which is exactly what this racism is founded on. And that's what I'm going to talk about today with Roger Gitlin. I live in Klamath too, and the fact that the county has not said anything about him inviting folks to the reservation to eat in the log cabin diner, he targeted our community. Why didn't he do that here? Why didn't he target a restaurant in Crescent City or Smith River or Brookings? No, he targeted us. He did that to blatantly disrespect us, our bodies, and to blatantly disrespect tribal sovereignty. And I'm here to say enough is enough. We've waited 2 months. I've been seeing his post for 2 months now, and I haven't seen anything from our county supervisors, the other supervisors standing up, especially Bob Berkowitz, who never stood up for Klamath. He made one little comment on one little post. That's not standing up for Klamath, Bob Berkowitz. Where were you? You left us to fend for ourselves when Gitlin divided this county, because that's what Gitlin does. He is inciting violence. He is saying that he will give our names out to people. That's inciting violence. He has got to go.
I also had the opportunity to speak to Denise Doyle-Schnacker one-on-one to ask what it was like organizing this event.
Yeah, so what was it like organizing just a moment for people to come together and to share their views that racism and bigotry and homophobia is not okay in our community? It's not easy in Del Norte County. the only way to do it that I've found is successful is literally by word of mouth and having relationships with people that you can say, hey, this thing is happening. This is how I feel about it. Would you join me? And the gentleman that walked up just a little bit ago that said, like, who are you? What group is this? Do you have monthly meetings? It's exhausting trying to fight hate in our county. It is absolutely exhausting. So if we were to hold regular meetings, people would be so burned out that that when it came time to do something important, they wouldn't have the bandwidth to do it. At least in my opinion, that's what I've found to be the case. I'm really, really excited that there are more young people here than I've seen at other ones, because I'm going to die probably sooner than later, and this world is not for me. This world is for the next generation, and we have failed when it comes to educating youth and children and the whole gamut in democracy and what it means to live in a democracy, what your rights are, what your responsibilities are as a citizen. So your responsibility is to be active, is to know what's happening. We don't encourage that, and we don't teach it, and that's a problem. So that's why we do things like this, to get together and say, to model what everyone should be doing, which is engaging with your government. So,
and I know you kind of described this as it wasn't really an organization. This is just neighbors coming together.
Yeah.
But even with that, is there any way that you would recommend for ways to support things like this?
Yeah. So social media. If you see someone being attacked or being called out or whatever, speak up and say something. Don't worry about retaliation, because your other neighbors will be there for you.
She mentioned the youth that attended, and quite a number did indeed attend. Unfortunately, they were too shy to do an interview, and I certainly didn't want to bully them into talking. I've been one of the lone youth at a protest myself, and I totally understand. But that bleeds into a very important point that Denise continued to explain.
I didn't want to say one more thing because I tend to talk too much. But Persephone asked me a question, what's one more thing that I wanted to say? And I told her that, when it comes to these kinds of things, usually it's this group over here. It's the older... Sorry, I'm going to put myself in there, guys. It's us people with the gray hair. And
or no hair.
I know this was not intentional at all, but look at this side of the room. And look at over here. Woo! Because I know this is hard. See, we don't care about what our friends think anymore. We we don't. But we know you guys do, and you still put yourselves in societal danger to be here. And just know that if anybody picks on you, says something to you that is hurtful, if anything is just, if you feel in danger emotionally, so physically, you call us. We will make an army to protect you for your right for democracy. So, okay.
After this, the rally was closed by a few last words from Cheryl Steinruck.
Hey, I just want to let everyone know from the bottom of my heart how much I appreciate you all being here, because this is our traditional land, okay? Yeah. This place is called Ta'at, and we have been working, and I'm thankful that you have joined us to do this kind of work. I know there's very few of us, really, and I'm really atypical, if you all know me. But by the same token is that we have a real purpose here, and that's what I want to thank each and every one of you for holding your signs, taking the time out of your lives, like Charlene said, to come down here and be with us. Because what else can we be doing other than protecting our democratic process and our democratic rights? I've grown up with this notion: if you do not exercise your rights, you will lose them. And there's always somebody waiting to take them from you. And I know that for a fact. So what we need to know are what are our rights and what do we have a right to do, and we force the issues. And that's what we're doing today. Yeah. We have a right to stand out here and let this county know we're not going to tolerate this. Right. And we're going to do it through our voting process.
I am working to develop a longer form story inspired by Gitlin's post. It will involve breaking down the blatant wrongness of the information and ideas in the post, as well as reviewing the history of some of Gitlin's actions in order to inform people of the extent of the danger he poses being a supervisor. While it surely will not change the mind of his diehard supporters, I can only hope it will serve to notify people of the kind of person he represents. Updates on the longer form story will be made when available. Stay safe, and Black Lives Matter.
I recently wrote a piece for this show examining the Defund the Police movement and how that movement could interact with our small community. If you haven't heard about it, the Defund the Police movement is focused on defunding police departments and reallocating those funds to agencies that focus on health and human services, in addition to making law enforcement centered around community involvement and crime prevention. Another large aspect of the movement is replacing some rapid response situations with social workers as opposed to police officers. The reason being that these social workers or other professionals would have the education needed to deal with a mental health crisis. However, in my previous interview with Mayor Blake Inscore, we discussed how the larger movement may not apply to smaller communities like our own. After speaking with the mayor, I was even more curious about how local law enforcement was responding to the trending hashtag. So, I reached out to Sheriff Erik Apperson to get his take. I first asked Sheriff Apperson about his personal history with local law enforcement.
I believe I was an explorer for the Del Norte County Sheriff's. I know I was an explorer. I'm just trying to remember what year. I want to say it was 95, 96. I was an explorer for a couple years around there, and that really inspired me to continue with local law enforcement. And I started my career with Del Norte County. I believe it was 1998 when I started by working in juvenile hall for a year as a correctional officer over there, and then I lateraled into the Del Norte County Jail, where I worked here for a couple years. I believe that was around 99, 2000. And then shortly after that, I got hired by the police department. So I went from the jail to the police department and through the College of the Redwoods Police Academy. And then I worked for the Crescent City Police Department, I believe, from 2001 to 2014. And then ran for sheriff successfully and was sworn in as sheriff in January of 2015. And I was relatively recently reelected, so I'm, in the early stages of my second term as sheriff.
I asked Apperson why he felt drawn to law enforcement as a career.
Yeah, I've always had this desire inside of me to be of service. It's always been in my DNA. I've always wanted to help people. I didn't quite know how to demonstrate that as a young man. I recently started a really just incredible relationship with my grandfather, my father's father, and we got pretty close over the last 10 years, and when I got to meet him and get to know him, I saw that he had that same desire. He was a wildland firefighter for, over 40 years before he retired. And I certainly had people in my life that I was related to that I admired for different reasons, but I never felt this closeness with anybody that I was related to that had the same sense of service that I do. And meeting my paternal grandfather, it gave me that, and it was an incredible gift.
So, kind of that role of wanting to be of service. Do you think you found that with being a part of our local law enforcement?
Absolutely, Avi. I got to be honest with you. I get people trying to pull me out of this community all the time. Not to brag, but I'm relatively young for the age, for the rank that I'm at right now, and I just love it here. And the reason, I think, really the driving force is twofold. First is, I think this community gave me a lot more chances than I earned. I think this community raised me. I think this community has supported me, not only, my professional career, but also as a young kid just trying to make his way. But the second part of that is when you work in a small community like this, and it sounds sort of selfish, but you get to see and feel the positive impact almost immediately that you're making. I've been in the situation where I've been able to really help some people out, even save some lives throughout my career, and I get to sort of encounter those people fairly routinely, and that feeling, that at least at some point you did something well and you did something right, and you get to see those people and maintain relationships with them, and every now and then they kind of come up and thank you and show appreciation. That's what you get by working in a small community.
Sheriff Apperson was hitting on a point that I made in my previous video on this subject: community. Because we are a relatively small town, we have close connections with our law enforcement. They live in the same neighborhoods, eat at the same restaurants, and shop at the same stores. I noted to Apperson that because it's such a small town, it seems like everybody knows everybody, and he had this to say.
Oh yeah, no, trust me, there's times when the lack of anonymity is tough. I've often said I'm world famous in a town that nobody's ever heard of, but but this is my bubble. These are my people. This is where I love. I was born a couple blocks from where I'm talking to you right now, and I'm raising my kids here, and life is good here. I'm 41 now, and I was born here. I've pretty much lived here my entire life, and I couldn't see myself living anywhere else.
I wanted to get Apperson's take on the Defund the Police movement, given his status in our local law enforcement. He noted that the topic can be complicated and mean many different things to many different people.
Well, there's a lot of layers, much like many of the subjects that are sort of polarizing people right now. Defund the Police isn't really in my opinion, easy read. If you ask several people what they believe defund the police means, there's a strong possibility you're going to get multiple answers. And I think from a philosophical perspective, I see what drives the idea, but I would need to see the practical application laid out.
I mentioned the ideas coming forward about replacing some aspects of police response with teams who are trained in de-escalation techniques and have mental health training to deal with those types of crises. Apperson spoke to the responsibilities that the local police have and the importance of rapid response.
I think one of the things that people struggle with is that, in this concept of taking money that's allotted to law enforcement and sort of reappropriating it into other organizations that are geared towards, really not utilizing criminal resources to bring a problem, a social problem, to some sort of resolution. Like, I get that idea, and I think the irony is that law enforcement as a whole has been, shouting for as long as I've been in law enforcement, and I'm sure, much longer than that we're expected to take care of too much already. But there's this component that people miss, and it's that we're the fast company. We're the rapid response team. We are the very first of the first responders. And a lot of these social challenges cannot be handled by people with a slow response, no matter what their intent is or how good their training or education or equipment is. And I'll give you some examples. I mean, within the last couple months, I have no idea how many times we've responded, we as law enforcement in Del Norte County have responded to overdoses where we've literally saved people's lives with the use of Narcan. Mm-hmm. And if you were to subscribe to the idea of defunding police, you would say, okay, if it's a medical call, we shouldn't go. If it's a fire call, we shouldn't go. If it's a mental health call, we shouldn't go. If it's anything that's not like an in-progress crime that jeopardizes, the safety or well-being of somebody being a victim, then we shouldn't go. But I had a deputy respond to an overdose call just a couple weeks ago, and when he got there, he administered a round of Narcan, which didn't work. He started using CPR and first aid techniques. Then he administered another round of Narcan, and after about 4 minutes, he was able to revive this person, and they're alive today. Now, the paramedics that responded were several minutes behind the deputy. So at that point, that body would have been there deceased for, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 minutes, which, you and I both know often somebody can't be revived at that point. In fact, they probably can't be revived at that point. Mm-hmm. So there's certain dynamics that people don't consider. Fire trucks can only drive so fast. Ambulances can only drive so fast. Law enforcement over the years has sort of been issued this public expectation that we're not just managing crime, we're dealing with emergency, urgent social crises. And until there's an actual plan where other entities acceptable by the expectations of our folks that we serve in public safety, until these other entities are spooled up to have immediate response in the middle of a crisis, then defunding the police just isn't going to work. People are going to die.
After hearing the extent to which our local law enforcement responds to mental health or drug crises, I was curious if they received any special training on what to do in those situations.
We do, and I think we could always receive more. And one thing that I can say, that's positive is that's the trend now. We're having deeper dives into law enforcement expectations and trainings than I've ever seen in my career. I've got a little bit more than 20 years in, and when I went to the academy at first, we weren't being taught about mental health response, and we weren't being taught about other sort of social challenges that we may meet. Now I can say that is a larger part of the curriculum, and specialized training is being developed. De-escalation techniques now are more refined than they've ever been. I can tell you that when I went to the police academy, it was sort of enculturated that, cops don't have to back down for any reason. We don't have to back down. We always move forward. We always use whatever force is necessary to overcome and affect the arrest. And that's not the undercurrent of modern law enforcement. The undercurrent of modern law enforcement is, go get some education, get an associate's degree or better, and then go to the police academy and get some life experience. And now there's a different expectation, I think, also with law enforcement. The expectation is we need to communicate more effectively. We need to learn more. We need to understand, and we need to be a little bit more patient and tolerant and educated.
As I discussed with Mayor Inscore in my previous interview, a large difference between our community and other larger cities is our law enforcement's participation in our community. In more metropolitan areas, the police officers don't live in the neighborhoods, which can lead to an othering of both the police and the citizens, which Apperson spoke to.
one thing I don't like is anything that separates law enforcement from the communities that we serve. And I'm kind of hypersensitive on that subject. Like, I'm not a big fan of the thin blue line or, anything that really says, us and them. I don't think that anything that contributes to that helps. So what we have in a small community like this, I mean, we joked about it earlier, but I was in night school with you. I mean, you and I took stats class together, right? Mm-hmm. And we sat next to each other and we talked. And you reached out to me on Facebook for this interview, and I gave you my personal phone number. And here we are talking. I mean, that is not common in larger communities. I know that if I go into a local restaurant today, somebody might be making my food that, I arrested them, or somebody on my staff arrested somebody in their family. And it really matters how you treat people. I like that about our community. I like the fact that I go on foot patrol and I wander around and I check in at the schools, and I participate in a lot of these community events. And it's not because I'm about to get make a run at getting reelected. It's because I've always been that way, and through being the sheriff, I continue to be that way. And I pride myself in my accessibility, and I think a lot of large communities don't have that.
Sheriff Apperson also noted that being a small town isn't the only reason our law enforcement is engaged with the community.
I think I would add in there, Avi, that there's plenty of small agencies doing it wrong. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's just a gimme that because cops live in the community and it's a small community that there's better relationships. I mean, I've experienced small agencies that have horrific relationships with their community, or individual cops that have horrific relationships with their small community. As a department, you can really make an effort to just do a couple things. You can be accessible and you can be transparent. And I think that's what's missing with a lot of relationships that go south. Like even talking about outside of law enforcement, outside of small communities, pick any box that you want to put yourself in. If you're not going to be accessible and if you're not going to be transparent, then you can't really start a healthy relationship, and you certainly can't maintain one. And I think that crosses about every boundary. I think it's universal, and I think it certainly applies to law enforcement. That as sheriff, it's been important to me that our department is accessible and it is transparent. One of the first things I did was put all our calls for service on the web, non-proprietary, so you don't have to be on social media. I did the same with our jail population. I constantly return phone calls and try my best to be available. We recently had an escape from our jail. Legally it was an escape, and there was a time when maybe that wouldn't be talked about very openly. And the first thing I did was I put a release out to our community telling them what happened. I accepted responsibility. I apologized, and I promised to do better. And our community could have really just let me have it. But by and large, what they did was they showed support. And I think that is a real temperature check as to the relationship here maybe versus other places.
I mentioned to Apperson that Mayor Inscore had talked about a hypothetical collaboration between Health and Human Services and the police in the creation of a hotline that could provide officers with a mental health professional on the phone. Apperson spoke to the possible effectiveness of this idea.
Yeah, I mean, as far as being able to call after hours and getting some help, there's already some services like that. But I mean, you're basically calling for a translator or an interpreter, right? I mean, that's what you're doing. You're making a phone call to somebody that can speak the language that you're trying to speak right now, and a lot gets lost in translation. I think what we have to do as a community is we have to figure out a way for a collaborative response of, you know, whatever professionals need to be present to augment public safety being there.
Apperson also mentioned the larger concepts of replacing some parts of police response with professionals like social workers, and how that might hit roadblocks that people aren't expecting.
The part that I take pause with is law enforcement has been sort of systematically defunded for several years now. You know, I don't think the answer is taking away more money from law enforcement. I think the answer is finding more money for these other services. Because, you know, let me give you an example. If somebody's out in the middle of Front Street with a knife to their throat and nobody else around, the Defund the Police movement would have you believe that's not a law enforcement problem. And I would agree that it's not necessarily a law enforcement problem, but it is a public safety problem. Are you going to take somebody that is unprotected, has no training in, you know, keeping themselves or somebody else safe physically, and put them in that situation, you know, i.e. a social worker? Or are you going to have a social worker go up to somebody with a knife to their throat, you know, and try to talk them down? I mean, there's real things that have to happen. Who's going to block traffic? Who's going to reroute people from around that environment? You know, dispatch has to get involved. There's real challenges that people are not addressing by this defund movement. And I'm all ears. I love to hear a good plan, but, you know, we need a plan.
I also spoke with Sheriff Apperson about the city and county's budget in regards to public safety.
You know, law enforcement often gets lumped into the greater public safety sort of budget line, and, you know, most municipalities spend at least half of their budget on public safety. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I think that percentage-wise, Crescent City and Del Norte County fall into tune with most of that. But public safety, you know, isn't just law enforcement. It's literally anything that's public safety. And unfortunately, those don't generate revenue, you know, and they shouldn't. You know, public safety shouldn't generate revenue because that's a slippery slope within itself. But unfortunately, financially, it ends up being this sort of black hole that money has to get thrown into.
Finally, I asked Sheriff Apperson if there's anything else he would like to say about law enforcement in our community.
I do. You know, first off, I want to thank you for reaching out, starting this dialogue. I think it's definitely a discussion that has to happen constantly. The driving force being how can law enforcement better serve the communities that we're here to serve. But I want to say that I think our law enforcement on a local level, I think they're doing great. I think that they are underpaid. I think that they don't have the equipment that most law enforcement agencies have. I think more is expected of them, and I think that they often exceed their expectations. And I think that the fact that our community genuinely demonstrates their support on a regular basis sort of validates that, you know. So I feel honored to be in the position that I'm in. I feel definitely indebted to this community, and I know many of the women and men that suit up next to me every day share that feeling. They feel like they're coming to work for the right reasons in a community that supports them. And I guess that's it.
I would really like to thank Sheriff Erik Apperson for having this conversation with me and continuing to be receptive and active in our community. As he said, this is a conversation that simply needs to be had. I think every community should be able to address possible problems and identify where they could be doing better. Stay safe, and Black Lives Matter.
Redwood Voice is continuing to bring out its new Redwood Voicecast in order to keep connected with the community. This past week, the third ever Redwood Voicecast aired and has been posted to YouTube. In the latest Voicecast, we explore the following. Persephone gives themselves and Avi a challenge so that they may promote the Redwood Voicecast on the radio station while simultaneously fitting it into their busy work schedules, which in turn lets them stretch their improv muscles a little bit. Just a little bit. The previous and current News Now newscasts, current being the one you're listening to right now, are discussed, which includes a behind-the-scenes look at projects from the last one, how some may continue, and what we were looking forward to during the making of this very newscast. Our conversation leads a bit into things we miss, but also things we like. The food forest, for instance. We hope they're doing well, and Persephone recounts a wonderful one-on-one class that they recorded, or I guess I recorded, for a project for some folks at the station. We also talk about why it's important to support the Saturday Farmers Market, our experience with it so far, and some of the things going on there. All of this and more in the third ever production of the Redwood Voicecast, a podcast where we talk about the latest and greatest happenings behind the scenes of Redwood Voice. Join us. But of course, if you would like a more apt explanation and feel of the Voicecast, you can listen to it for yourself on the Redwood Voice YouTube channel. For more information on Redwood Voice, you can check out our website, redwoodvoice.org, or our Facebook page, facebook.com/redwoodvoice.dnatl. For all links on Redwood Voice for maximum navigation efficiency, you can find our link tree, linktr.ee/Redwood Voice. No caps, no symbols in between, all the Redwood Voice you need. Thanks again for tuning in to News Now. To hear more episodes of our newscast, check out kfugradio.org or our YouTube channel. Special thanks to Wild Rivers Outpost and Jessica Sanar, Crescent City Bureau Chief, for providing great content. Tune in 2 weeks from now to KFUG Community Radio 101.1 FM or stream online at kfugradio.org to hear more news from your favorite local radio station. This newscast was edited by Persephone Rose. The voices of this newscast were Persephone Rose and Avi Critz.